This film begins with a black man walking alone, along the side of the road. Suddenly, a mysterious white car approaches behind him. After that, someone from the car hit this black man hard enough to knock him out. It is reasonable to conclude that this black man was kidnapped. The scene shifts to another location, where we see a black man named Chris, who is the main character in the film, and a white woman named Rose, Chris's girlfriend. They have been dating for a long time and plan to go to Rose's parents' house. Simply put, Chris will meet his future in-laws. He seemed to be very happy during the trip. Chris is calling his friend in the middle of his journey, who was a police officer, named William. He warning him that the neighborhood had recently become unsafe. Many crimes primarily target black people. He also suggested that Chris maintain a distance from white people. Chris just grinned and didn't seem to care. The journey continued until a deer jumped towards their moving car, causing the deer to be accidentally hit. Soon after, a police officer come to check. He apparently assumed Chris was driving and suspected Chris of being drunk. In response, Rose felt the officer was being rude. She started a fight right away. The officer eventually gave up and let them go. This might have been a bad sign, but they kept going on their journey. Chris was welcomed with open arms by his two future in-laws upon arriving at Rose's parents' home. While sitting together and discussing Chris's background, the father, who was aware that Chris was a smoker, offered him a way to quit, namely the hypnotherapy method. It was later discovered that the mother was a skilled psychiatrist and hypnotist who had frequently cured people of their bad habits, but Chris refused to do so because he still wanted to smoke after eating. Chris saw something strange when her father showed him around the house. The gardener was black, and the waiter who brought drinks was black as well. Furthermore, their eyes and gestures looked strange and uncomfortable. Then they ate dinner together. This is Jeremy, Rose's brother. He is a lazy person who enjoys making rude jokes. Also, Jeremy talked about something that brought up the black race again. Research had shown that black people have stronger genetics than white people. He wanted to prove this by challenging Chris to a fight. However, his family did not approve. The clock was ticking on their bedtime. Chris awoke at midnight and decided to go out the house, looking for fresh air while smoking. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. For no apparent reason, the gardener he saw this afternoon ran towards him but turned away as soon as he got close. Chris was confused, but when the waiter showed up and stood right in front of the window, he was shocked again. The waiter was seen to be admiring her beauty in the window mirror. Rose's mother was sitting alone in the reading room when Chris got back in the house, which surprised him again. The woman asked Chris if he had gone outside to smoke. Chris responded calmly when the woman also offered to help him stop smoking with hypnotherapy. The woman stirred the tea in her cup, making Chris suggestible and entering his subconscious. Chris was forced to be honest about how sad he was until he could no longer hold back his tears. After that, Chris went deeper into his mind. When he woke up, he was already in bed. He immediately went outside with his camera to look around and unexpectedly met the gardener. Since both Chris and the gardener are black, Chris attempted to greet him in a friendly manner, but received the same response as the waiter. A strange smile and stiff speech, which confused Chris. Chris was also telling Rose about last night's incidents. He wasn't sure if what happened last night was real or just a dream, and Rose regretted for her mother behavior. People started showing up at Rose's house in groups. It turned out that a large family gathering was taking place at Rose's parents' home. Chris introduced himself to each member of the Rose family. While capturing the moment, Chris noticed one of her relatives, who seemed to be black. Chris approached him, and the man's gaze and gestures were as strange as those of Rose's waiter and gardener. When Chris greeted him in a black way, the man shook Chris's hand instead. These strange things made Chris even more confused, which made him curious. Chris walks into the backyard and meets Jim Hudson, a well-known gallery owner. It turned out that he went blind at an excellent time for his career. Even though his business is now successful and profitable, he can't seem to enjoy it all due to his lack of normal vision. Chris returned to his room and reported his best friend about the odd happenings at Rose's house. He warned Chris again to be cautious of white people due to the numerous kidnappings and crimes committed on black people. Chris just grinned again, and the waiter appeared right in front of Chris' room as he was discussing race and the strange things that were going on. Chris saw the strangeness again with his own eyes. The waiter acted strangely when she's smiling and started crying, as if she were upset or fighting something. She apologized and requested permission to return to work, so who knows what happened. When Chris left the house, her father and brother greeted him and asked him a strange and somewhat ridiculous question about what it was like to be black. Chris didn't want to answer, so he asked the black man from earlier to do it. Chris took a picture of him in secret with a cell phone flash while they were talking. His nose started to bleed all of a sudden. He screamed at Chris and told him to get out immediately. Chris was growing confused by what was going on. He said the man had a disorder that caused him to have seizures, and one of the things that set them off was a flashlight. To calm down from what happened, Chris and Rose went to the edge of the lake. At the same time, Chris was being auctioned off by his father and his extended family for a very high price. After several bids, the winner was Jim Hudson, who was blind. The conclusion is that these people are not Rose's close relatives or extended family. Instead, they are part of a secret society that often traffics black people for unknown reasons. When the event ended and everyone had left, Chris, who was alone in the room, sent William a photo of the man. After thinking that this man's face looked familiar and having William confirm it, it turned out to be valid. The boy who was taken hostage at the beginning of the movie was Andre. As soon as Chris realized that something was wrong with them all, he told Rose to leave her house. Chris managed to notice a small open room while Rose was looking for his car keys. When he checked, he discovered many pictures of Rose with different men, including the waiter. They have one thing in common: they are all black. When Chris went downstairs, he found Jeremy, the mother and father waiting for him. They appeared to be preventing Chris from leaving the house, so he asked Rose to speed up the search for his car keys. But it turns out Rose was involved from the beginning. Chris is physically stronger than all four of them, so he shouldn't have any trouble leaving. However, when the mother tapped the spoon against her teacup, Chris fell asleep right away. He had been told not to move when he heard the sound of the spoon hitting the cup. Meanwhile, William started to worry about Chris, who was now unreachable. After a while, he chose to report this to the police station. Unfortunately, the police did not believe William's story because it sounded crazy. Chris gets locked in a secret room and chained to a comfy chair with a TV near him. Then a show played about a secret cult group founded by Roman Armitage, aka Rose's grandfather, that consisted of potential buyers of wealthy and evil people. Around the 1900s, they would take black young and fit people hostage and hypnotize them so they couldn't move or speak. Then, use a brain transfer procedure known as transmutation to give these people new bodies that will help them live longer, stronger, healthier, and fitter lives. Gallery owner Jim Hudson, who is blind, will take over Chris's body. This means that Chris will have brain surgery in a few hours. Chris will have Jim Hudson's brain put into his head, and Chris's brain will be thrown away. The final result will be like the maid, the gardener, and Andre. Everything made sense considering their strange behavior. The way they talk and move is formal, just like Andre, who seemed to be having trouble shaking hands before. That's because they're not their old selves, even though their subconscious still fights against it sometimes. For example, when the maid suddenly started crying, the mother's spell on Andre broke because Chris was taking a picture of him with a flashlight. It turned out that Andre was warning Chris to leave this place right away, but Chris was unaware of it at the time. Chris would scratch his fingers on the chair's leather until he tore it every time he was tired and stressed. Quickly, he had an idea. He could cover his ears with cotton to block out the sound that was hypnotizing him. While his father was starting surgery, Jeremy went to get Chris and take him to the operating room. When Chris was released, he quickly assaulted Jeremy until he passed out. Chris went straight to the operating room and used deer antlers to attack the father. When he got upstairs, the waiter was there but she ran away quickly. When the mother shows up, she will hypnotize him once more using the spoon and teacup. But Chris quickly threw it and attacked the mother right away. When Chris was about to open the door, Jeremy, who was still alive, tried to stop him from leaving. At the same time, Rose is seen looking for a new man to become her next victim. Right after beating Jeremy, Chris jumped right into his car. However, as he was about to leave the gate, he accidentally bumped into the waiter, and Rose realized this. Chris chose to save the waiter and took her out of there right away. The waiter turned out to be Rose's grandmother, so it was a terrible mistake. Chris's car hit a tree while they were fighting. Chris was able to stay alive and get out of his car, but then the gardener, who was really Rose's grandfather, showed up and attacked him instantly. Chris needed to get rid of the hypnosis at once, so he quickly grabbed his cell phone and used a flashlight. Soon after that, Rose showed up with a gun. The gardener asked for the gun, saying that he would kill Chris himself. Rose didn't know that the gardener was no longer hypnotized, so he shot her and killed himself to end his pain. Chris went up to Rose, who was dying. Rose was choked out by Chris, but she smiled and didn't seem scared, so Chris decided to leave her that way. Not long after that, a police car pulled up. Rose quickly called for help and said Chris did it. It turned out that William came in his work car with the purpose of picking up Chris from that location. Rose and her whole family died. It's probable that Chris and William are going to report this incident to the police, exposing the crimes they have committed for decades. But keep in mind that the people in this community are very wealthy, so it won't be easy to find out what they've done. Thank you for coming, and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.